You're listening to the Allman Report on NewsTalkSTL.
And good evening, and welcome to the Allman Report here at NewsTalkSTL. And Phil and Ethan have spread it out, baby. We're on actually like a little firing line, like loungy thing with one of my old friends. He's a Democrat. He is running against Ann Wagner in the 2nd Congressional District. His name is the legendary Ray Hartman. I've known you for more than 30 years.
We have.
Way back. Of course, you know, he owned the RFT for a long time. You know him from Donnybrook as well, and you know him as kind of like an all-around town dude who's always been around, and super pleasant guy, I have to say.
Well,
you and I have had we run into each other all the time at these Christmas parties.
Well,
and
you were
things
always
like
the
that.
big star. I wasn't, but no, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. And you know what's interesting about you and your candidacy? And I have to say, I feel like I am back in 1987 Democratville, because it does not seem like you fit into the Democrat Party as it is now. Very far left. I've never known you to be very far left. Right. Very anti-gun. They seemingly are pro-war. All the things that I think that you, even all of your time being a liberal, you're more like almost an Eagleton Democrat. You're like an old school Democrat. So how do you fit into this current party now? I mean, you're not an interloper by a stretch, but how do you fit into the current Democrat Party now?
Well, everywhere I go, I start out by saying I have been a proud and loyal Democrat for 25 long weeks. Okay, and it's true.
Yeah,
I wasn't. You may know I go back to working as Kit Bond's speechwriter in 75, 76. On the Republican side, I was an independent then for the next, 48 years. I was an independent as a journalist. As so many journalists are. And now I am officially, I am a Democrat. I mean, but I have not been a party regular. And, I think I'm pretty independent minded, I'd like to think. And I am, I'm called old enough often enough that I guess I can live with old school too.
Yeah.
Because I really am. I do kind of harken back and yearn for the days. And I know we always paint. It's not like we've never had conflict in our politics, but I certainly in my lifetime we haven't, and I think yours, we haven't had the kind of polarization and the kind of people getting their views from completely different silos. So I really appreciate you having me on, because we sort of hail from different silos, and I think it's a big part of the problem is that you got the red silo, the blue, right, left, whatever you want to call it, and it's hard to debate issues when you start from different factual you have different, everybody's like the old thing, you're not entitled to your own set of facts.
Yeah.
Well, everybody sort of is now.
Yeah.
People have different set of facts. So when you say, well, let's get together and argue about the issues, we're starting in different places.
So the issues are important. You're not a Trump hater, right?
Well, I would say I don't use the word hate.
Right.
I'm not a fan.
Right.
But I don't.
And is that why you're running? I mean, let me ask you.
Yeah, I think.
What bothers you about Trump? And then what bothers you about the Democrats?
Well, I'm not gonna. The second part, I'm just going to let you. I mean, I'm fine with the Democrats. I'm part of the team now. But as far as what bothers me about Trump, there are two words that I always use talk about Trump. One is reprehensible, and the other is predator. Now, as you know, I like to borrow things as a journalist all these years from other folks. Those are the terms Ann Wagner used in 2016 in October, the day after Access Hollywood came out. She was one of the only members of Congress who called for him to step down from the ticket. And this is not
we remember.
She wasn't just quoted. She was, well, you were part of the story, actually, because she came out, and I want to say it was like, I forget the exact date, but it was a Thursday or Friday, and about 4 weeks before the election, she described him as reprehensible and a predator. She invoked her work with sex trafficking victims specifically as the context, which was, she had every right to be proud of her work on that, I think. But it was interesting to actually, it's almost like swearing on your parents' grave or something. Using that, invoking it, and And then it was on your show the week before the election that she acted like she had never said it. She basically said, well, of course I'm voting for Donald Trump.
Yeah,
she said it on your show
right.
like the week before the election. And it was like, and to me, whatever your politics are, and I'm not, I don't hate Ann Wagner. I'm not, if somebody wants somebody to hate on her, and this is, again, it's not something I'm saying for your benefits, but I tell people, look, this is not my style. We both grew up in St. Louis County. We both went to Mizzou. I was there 10 years ahead of her. We root for the same sports teams. I do point out that I quote a certain past president by saying, I will not for political purposes make an issue of her youth and inexperience.
Yeah,
Use
right.
Ronald Reagan.
No, I know. But
But back to this. No, but seriously, to flip like that, and now she claims to be all in, but I don't know that people in MAGA especially buy that. So I would say, though, yeah, I actually do think I have a very low opinion of him. And,
right. But why would you say he's reprehensible? I don't want to obsess over this, but why do you say he's reprehensible?
Well, because I think that, first of all, I do think he has, having seen him, as we all have for the last 8 years, I do think he does have, he's a narcissist on a real, I mean, everybody's a little bit of a narcissist in politics. You could make a case he has narcissistic personality disorder. I mean,
you almost have to run for office.
Well, you don't have
I'm
to
not
have
calling you a narcissist.
No,
I'm just saying
no.
you almost have to have an ego.
You
have to have an ego.
I agree.
And he's from Queens.
I get it, but I
from
remember
South County. So hey, there you go.
I get it.
You know what I mean?
I was I fought my way off the streets of Creve Coeur. No, but okay. We were tough kids. But no, the point is, I have. I'm not running against him.
Yeah.
I'm running against Ann. But I would say that I have, certainly my problems with him are with his, the big one, of course, is when he lost the election, which he did in 2020, to essentially try to overthrow that decision.
Right. Well, now
to
he
me
didn't try to overthrow it.
I think
this was a January 6th, and I don't want to get too deep into that anyway, because I want to get on to the issues with you. Right. But I mean, in my opinion, just in case you haven't heard it,
right.
It is true that when that January 6th convening of Congress happened, it was there to try to figure out and assess whether or not each state's electoral college votes had the kind of veracity and integrity to go ahead and certify the election.
Right.
And there were 6 states that were in question, and that's what this was all about, making sure that everything was right. Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court, violated its own constitution in extending mail-in voting, and that was the whole reason Texas sued them. And so it wasn't really about overthrowing the election. It was about trying to make sure that the certification had integrity to it. I'm just telling you that from our point of view, just in case you were thinking about that, this overthrowing it. None of us wanted to overthrow or overturn an election unless, of course, it was something that had integrity to it. Yeah. And that's what we were trying to do, is make sure that each vote was counted and that each vote had integrity to it and veracity to it. And that was the reason why the January 6th demonstration occurred and everything else. I just want you to know that, just in case you want to go out in the hinterlands and explain that to the fellow liberals.
I don't talk about it in the race. It's not an issue between Ann Wagner and me.
I got you. Yeah.
I have a different take on it. I do think, I will point out to you that the January 6th hearings in Congress, almost, if not 99% of the witnesses against Donald Trump were Republicans who he had hired and appointed.
And think about the witnesses who they didn't talk to, though. It was a sham
committee.
I
mean, a lot of people wouldn't come. But my point is, I don't think that was. But my point is, I think, I will say this selfishly, I hope, and I know you're not doing it, and people, we're not going to change each other's minds about that. I have a different take on it. But it would be, from a Democratic standpoint, I hope that he wants to litigate that rather than talk about the future. Right. So I mean, I don't mind talking about it. I do think it was. I do think that while I don't paint everybody with the same brush, I don't think there was ever a molecule of evidence that that the election wasn't done properly. You can argue about different states. The one I think is interesting, no one ever talks about, is North Carolina. because my understanding of the theory of the case was the objection was mail-in voting and new ways to make it easier to do mail-in voting and really a tight race. Well, North Carolina had mail-in voting. They had 3 new ways to make it easy. It was as tight as Pennsylvania, but it never came up. You know why? Because the Republicans won North Carolina. It was the same set of everything, but Republicans won. No, but I'm just saying everything that bothered some people about some states should have bothered them about North Carolina, but nobody brought it up because you won.
Mail-in voting was inherently
and I don't think it was
built for fraud.
See, I just don't think it was.
Under the guise of COVID, but
but that's okay. We can,
because I want to let you know that
that's fine.
I think there's a strong possibility. I mean 85, 90% that Trump wins the Electoral College, even if he doesn't win the popular vote. 2016 all over again. There's also a strong possibility that District 2 can elect a Democrat congressman. So I'm asking you, let's say that you become the next congressman from the second. You would agree with many of the issues and policies of President Trump, however, right? I mean,
are you agree with him?
Well, yeah. I mean, would you cooperate? Because you seem,
first of all,
I pointed out, different. You seem different than other Democrats.
I wouldn't say
you're a border guy, right? You a strong border?
Well, I will say this. I have one of the things when you talk about what I have a problem when I use reprehensible Trump, I think it is reprehensible to talk about immigrants, illegal or otherwise, poisoning the blood of our people. I have a hard time seeing you, Jamie Allman, subscribing to the theory that these people are poisoning the blood of America. That's actually, well, you know whose rhetoric it is. It's a guy in Germany. And the idea that they're all coming from prisons and with no evidence.
In Venezuela, absolutely they are coming from the prisons.
Well, here's the deal. The bottom line is, what do you say, am I a strong border guy? I definitely think we need to do a better job securing the border. I think that the step, that the bipartisan bill on that was a good step in the right direction. And I didn't think it was acceptable that Donald Trump didn't want to see that happen because he wanted to have the turmoil. I also think very strongly that it's about 6 million dreamers that are here through no fault of their own that grew up here should not be, should be given a path to citizenship, should not be deported. If I understand his plans, they might be subject to mass deportation.
No, he would not be deporting.
Well,
that's not going to happen.
Well, I hope not, but he hasn't specified he wouldn't. But I think, and when he talks about millions, I think that's who he's talking about.
No, he's talking about all the illegals.
Well, I know he is, but one of the
problems
is technically those people are illegals, and so when ICE goes knocking door to door to round up illegals, they're not going to necessarily distinguish between dreamers and other illegals. But so I don't agree with that premise, and I think that would be a tragedy because those are kids that grew up here in a country.
Yeah, I don't think
no one in other country. I don't think many people know it.
As a conservative, I'm not for it.
I know,
but
when Donald Trump and J.D. Vance say, "Oh no, we're not talking about the dreamers," then I'll believe you. Okay, because we'll just again.
If they thought that, ask them, like for instance at debates and things like that.
Well, yeah, the debates, the media doesn't.
But you don't support Kamala Harris' position, where she called for abolishing ICE and all that other nonsense.
Well, Kamala Harris's position today is I'm very supportive of what she says today. Any politician, you can go back years and say, well, you said this then. You want politicians to evolve and to listen. She's been vice president 4 years. She's got a different perspective. I know everybody, it's like I'm sure some people want me to own everything I said in the 80s or 90s. I think you got to, if you want to run against her or what her plans are today, that's fine. I'm not gonna.
You're convinced her evolution then is real?
I do. I do. Okay. I think she's real. I think she's a very genuine person. And again, I'm very supportive of her. Obviously, she's the head of the ticket I'm running on, but I actually do believe her. I think she's, and she isn't, it's easy to paint her in one way or the other. She was a tough prosecutor. She really was. And she gets criticized from both sides. Some people on the left say she was too mean,
Well,
some people on the right say she wasn't mean enough, but the point is she was a prosecutor for all these years. And quite frankly, I don't think this attempt that some have turned her into some kind of this radical. And frankly, I have to say, even Ann Wagner, I got to say, you go on her website and she's using terms. You want to the adjectives I have to describe her? None. I don't describe her. I don't call her names. But you go on her website, even somebody who presumably presents herself as more moderate is talking about the socialist Biden agenda, and it's like, come on, just go back to your textbooks and look up social. I mean, nobody.
Well, I mean, it's wealth sharing. I mean, socialism. That's exactly what they promote.
I don't think there's
redistributing wealth, taxing the rich, all that stuff. It's
taxing the rich at a fair rate is not socialism. Socialism is from all according to their abilities to all their from all.
Yeah.
From their means, from all their abilities to their means. No one's for that.
Promoting Kennedy era tax hikes, 70%.
No one's saying that. I don't think anyone's doing that.
There are a lot of Democrats who do.
Okay, well, I don't.
Biden has even.
All I can speak for myself is I don't. I haven't heard. I have heard the idea of not. And even renewing the Trump tax cuts. I'm not 100% against renewing them en masse. I am against renewing them for people over 400,000.
Okay,
so that's a position. I'm not saying I'm against all Trump tax renewal.
Okay.
But I am against. I don't think that. I do think there are millionaires and billionaires who genuinely don't pay their fair share, and I do not think those people. The argument is, well, if you tax them to where they're paying as much as the rest, they have the means to go to another country, and I say, don't let the door hit you in the butt.
All right,
you're
a person that.
But I do. I'm not a socialist. I started a company. I'm a good example of rags to riches, back to rags.
Absolutely.
And I was a pure capitalist. I had businesses for 40 years. I never took one penny. Not one penny. Now, it's easy to say on journalism because you couldn't back those days get SBA loans. I never took a penny from the government. I kind of almost had a pretty bad experience with a commercial real estate that kind of ended up costing me a lot, and wasn't even a TIF involved. In other words, I don't believe in corporate welfare, and so I am a pure capitalist, and I've experienced the highs. I'm very proud of how well I did, and not so proud of when I hit the wall. I also also didn't pass. You make mistakes. If you're in the arena, you win, you lose.
Yeah.
And I think that's anyone. I don't think anybody could plausibly say that I'm anything but a capitalist because I've got the success and the failure to show for it. So we agree with that. Right, but I don't think that capitalism is. It's look. If you go back to the turn of the 20th century with the robber barons and monopolies, capitalism as a pure form of economics still has to have some modification, some regulation.
So we have isolated then, at least on one part of agreement, if Trump is president, that you would support the renewal of the tax cuts, not the part. I don't think
not the part he wants, but no. I mean the bottom part. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So speaking of capitalism, then, because I want to get the guns too eventually. Our time is running here, but the capitalism. So trade. Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I think that ultimately Democrats and Republicans finally came to an agreement on, when we saw the Republican Party talking about free trade, but it wasn't fair trade. And President Trump has advocated tariffs, and the Kamala Harris Biden administration does not. And most of us who are conservatives support tariffs.
I understand.
Much like Reagan did. He taxed everything from clothespins to the rice rockets coming over here.
Do you
support tariffs?
No, because there are tariffs. It's not an all or nothing. But no, in general, like all this talk about tariffs on China, there's all kinds of complexity, as you well know, to trade policy. But at the end of the day, users pay tax. It's essentially a sales tax. No matter how you spin it, at the end of the day, when you tax goods coming into this country, the users pay the price. It's a little like if you raise the sales tax, which I think we've done too much in saying, oh, if you raise the sales tax from 6 to 10%, the manufacturers are paying it. It's the people who go to the store and pay it on their taxes. And so in my opinion, it is a tax on the users, and whether it's cars, whatever, it's going to end up being paid by the middle class. That's whatever always happens. So no, I think taxes are, and I think it's pretty commonly accepted. I know he's got this line about, those countries are going to pay the tariffs. It's just economically not true. I don't even know how to analyze it, and I don't purport to be some distinguished economist. But the basics are, no, I think they're taxes on the users, and I think that would end up it would be hurting us. I think so. I'm against his tariffs.
Well,
we can just disagree
because really in the end, you have to give businesses. If Kamala Harris says what she means, which is she wants to build more small businesses here, wants to be friendly to the business community,
I think she does.
And that's one way you have to do it, by making sure they have a competitive advantage and are not competing with these people who are like China, for instance, who are just eating our lunch.
There are ways to do that I do not think taxing people, which ends up costing everybody, is the way to do it.
Okay, what would be a way to do it?
I think there's obviously trying to enforce our unfair, not allow people to have unfair trade practices. It's very complicated. As I say, I don't have a blueprint here for you.
Yeah.
But certainly when other countries cheat, when they violate international laws and norms about child labor or about the environment and so forth, you've got to do everything you can to enforce them.
Yeah.
You got to support. There's ways to, and I don't have Harris's plan in front of me, but there are ways to give tax credits and incentives to our businesses directly that are not available, that will make them stronger competitors. And you got to remember, when he ended up doing that, the tariffs, he had to end up, if you remember, we had to spend all the revenue from the tariffs to subsidize the farmers. That once he put tariffs on the farmers, what happened was China said, okay, you want a trade war? We'll give you a trade war. We got plenty of places to buy food. And they ended up buying their food from other countries around the world. And our farmers were all practically going out of business, if you remember. It was something like 12 trillion. I think we had some ridiculous amount of money that we had to pay in subsidies and essentially turn our farmers, who are our heroes, into welfare recipients.
But that wasn't under Trump.
Yes, that was under Trump. When he did the tariffs, China basically had a trade war with us. Look it up. We ended up under Trump having to subsidize the farmers, and he did it. I mean, to his credit, I suppose you could say he didn't let them die, but it was his trade war that caused the farmers. And so it's not as easy as it looks.
I know. I think the family farmers were put out of business by corporate farming, which is
that's that's another issue. Corporate farming. That's something you could probably
I need to take a break here, Ray, But it's Ray Hartman, folks, and I hope you're enjoying the discussion. Make sure you put the stuff in the comments section, everything you want to do. I want to ask you, too, when we come back, since you like Kamala's new positions as opposed to her old ones, then you have to then be happy that she changed her position on guns. Or she allegedly changed her position on guns. I want to ask you about that and the so-called Green Revolution and the woke progressivism that I know that you said even before we went on that you're not a fan of. So we'll be back right after this on the Allman Report on News Talk STL.
You're listening to the Allman Report on NewsTalkSTL.
Hey, welcome back to the Allman Report here with Ray Hartman, who is running in the 2nd Congressional District as a Democrat against Ann Wagner. Very briefly, we don't have to obsess over this, but I know that Kamala Harris has advocated gun confiscation before. She's on tape as saying she would go into homes and go through locked doors. This is on tape, okay? I'm not making this up. It's on tape. Hang on, though. Okay. Going through locked doors and checking to make sure people have their guns in safe places. Now, I know you cannot possibly support that. Mm-hmm. So she now says she's changed her mind on that. And so since you're happy with the new Kamala Harris and changing her mind, you must be happy with the fact that that the Democrats don't have plans, supposedly, to go after our guns.
I do not have any idea where that other than Wayne LaPierre, who basically...
It came from her mouth.
No, okay.
Oh.
Well, if you want to go there, okay, Donald Trump on Howard Stern's show said on tape, clearly, I favor partial birth abortion. He said it. Now, maybe you think that's the old Donald Trump. He said it. It's on tape. It's undisputed. He said, I favor partial birth abortion.
Right.
Now, okay, so we could play that game. My feeling is this, and you could ask that way you want. Here's the deal. Here's what I think about the Second Amendment. First of all, I'm a gun owner. So I certainly believe the Second Amendment is an important part of our Constitution. And I'm not one of the folks that says, well, it's only for a militia. I think it is fair to infer a right of self-defense, even though it wasn't mentioned by the founders in the Constitution. Just like I thought it was very reasonable to infer a right of privacy on the question of abortion rights. So you can infer it. There wasn't the words there. People say, oh, there's no mention of privacy. There's also no mention of self-defense. I don't have a problem with that. I will say this. You and I have made our careers on the First Amendment, and we have free speech. We don't have free speech, for example, to call the principal. It's a crime. If someone calls the principal of a school and says, I'm going to shoot up your school, that's a crime in and of itself.
Absolutely, yeah.
Now, that's an abrogation, if you want, of the First Amendment. The Second Amendment also does not provide you the right either to shoot that school up or to gather the means to do it. Where I disagree, and I say, I don't know what your position is. Of course, I'm not for any gun confiscation. I will say this. There's nothing in the Second Amendment, in my judgment, that entitles people to unlimited arsenals. In other words, if they wanted to make it unlimited, if they wanted to make it to match the power of the government, they could have said so.
It does, though. Okay, no, it does, because the Second Amendment, I agree with you, the Second Amendment was not designed to provide us with guns to defend ourselves or even hunt, for that matter. But it was providing us or ensuring the God-given right to have the ability to fight against a tyrannical government. So every gun is a weapon of war, and every arsenal is an arsenal in the event that the government runs crazy.
We just look at the Second Amendment differently. I don't think it did that, and I think that it's reasonable to have gun ownership for sportsmanship and for self-defense, home self-defense, or a car or whatever.
And to take up arms against the government. That's what the Second Amendment is there for.
I don't agree with that, and we'll just have to agree to disagree.
I'm not calling for an armed revolution. I'm just saying that we should always have the capability of doing that.
As your logic, then every citizen should be able to have a handheld nuclear weapon or a rocket launcher to shoot down helicopters. And I don't have, I don't think so. And so we just have a different take on the Second Amendment. And I think we need to if you want to be operating weapons designed to kill large numbers of people in a short number of time, join the military. That's all I'm saying.
Well, we don't want a country where only the military have the guns and we don't.
Well, okay, then we just...
Or the tanks.
It's a full-fledged disagreement.
I get it.
I think that I do not want to take any guns. And by the way, the assault weapons ban, which I would advocate renewing, and you can look this one up. No proposal, even current ones, contemplate taking away assault weapons that exist now. None of them. And anybody says that is lying. The fact is, any ban on assault weapons would be on the further manufacture and sale going forward. And so the whole idea, and I know a lot of people out there, and I understand that this is where we have the different silos. But no, of course I wouldn't favor taking away people's guns. I don't want the government going door to door to take away people's guns, but I also don't want them going door to door to round up millions of immigrants and put them in concentration camps. And so I wish we could.
Says that? No,
well, how are you going to do?
Camps?
I'm sorry. Donald Trump talks about mass immigration. You're just going to go
mass
ask them to leave?
Yeah.
How are you going to do that? I mean, you got to put them in camps.
Them.
Well, how are you going to deport? Where are you going to put them? You're just going to ask them to leave? Of course, you have to put them in camps. I mean, you have to. That's what happened with. I mean, God, it's like what happened to the poor Japanese people in World War II on steroids. If you're going to round up and deport millions of people, it sounds great. Who's going to do it? You think they're just going to go, get on the phone, we'll meet you at noon for lunch and then we'll deport you. It doesn't work that way. And so the point is, you and I might agree more, if that ever came to be, those people who really have suspicion of big government, and I would argue on another subject that's dear and dear to my heart, is I don't think government should be making women's decisions for them.
Closing the border would be a better option.
Closing the border there's no question that to the extent we could invest in, and it's mostly technology. I mean, if somebody wants to build a wall, fine. Walls don't work. I mean, it's technology. It's a very expensive. This is where, let me say something. Can I because I think it's important, and it's not something, again, I'm saying it for your benefit. It's something I talk about. I have one committee that I want to be on if I get elected. This is for real, and I say it everywhere I go. It's called the Problem Solvers Caucus. It's 32 Republicans, 32 Democrats. It's very little known, gets no attention. If you look you can go to Wikipedia, look up caucuses.
I heard about them.
There's a million caucuses, and most of them are pretty partisan on the left or right. I want to join they got to let you in, but
I'm always afraid when Democrats and Republicans come together.
Okay, but then
McCain-Feingold would be a perfect example of that.
Be afraid of me. Okay, be afraid of me then.
Free speech.
Be afraid, because I'm going to be that guy if I win.
Solvers.
Be afraid, Jamie, because I'm going to be that, because I think that's what you need.
Yeah.
I actually believe, and I get in trouble on my own side saying, look, I'm supposed to sit here and say, I'm good, you're evil, Jamie. It's just not how I'm built. I grew up in a time where I grew in a very conservative household where I was kind of taught to really have a high opinion of Barry Goldwater, and then who I actually kept the high opinion of. When he died in the 80s, I wrote a column said, Confessions of a Goldwater Liberal, because he stuck to his real kind of Western conservatism roots. He was pro-choice. He was pro-gay rights ahead of his time. And why people say, he lost his mind. No, he didn't lose his mind. He stayed true to his roots. His best friend, who I got to see in 1976 after Kit lost, was Hubert Humphrey, his best friend. One of his very best friends. He and Hubert Humphrey were like this. That's what I aspire to, that world. Now,
hey, I like that. I love Goldwater.
But I also think, I can love, but I also loved Hubert Humphrey. And so my point being, and even in the old days with Ted Kennedy and Orrin Hatch, there were people, or Ronald Reagan, who I was not fond of as president, and Tip O'Neill. Those days are not, I want to say they're 100% gone, but they're pretty faded. Yeah. And that's, if you hate that, hate me, because that's what I'm for. And it's 64 people who actually want to solve things, walking in with the premise that our side doesn't have all the answers, and the other side isn't evil. And so that's where I come from.
Gotcha.
And so on issues like immigration, issues like guns, there needs to be some common ground, but you can't just keep saying thoughts and prayers when we have our school children being shot up.
So I'm not going to be snarky here, but do you think that Ted Kennedy's reprehensible after he drowned his girlfriend?
I don't know that. No, I'm not going to.
Donald Trump never drowned his girlfriend.
Okay.
I'm just telling you.
Okay, well.
Okay, so anyway, I want to get on to abortion.
I don't think
he did.
Okay.
Anyway,
that's not an issue.
But nobody's ever called Ted Kennedy reprehensible, even after all that.
Well, I'm just using Ann Wagner calling Trump reprehensible.
I got. Okay, so
and you got to admit, we could go through some of Donald Trump's.
The abortion issue, though, is interesting because you hit on that.
And I do think. Let me be clear. I think Donald Trump is. I think that I'm not. I think his criminality as as determined by a jury. He's going to have it appealed. I don't think that that's something, that we should just give him a pass on. But I'm not running against Trump. I'm running against Ann Wagner, and I'm running really to change our politics in a way that the one big difference, and I'd like to get this point in because we talk about a lot of issues. We have a difference of opinion on a lot of issues. I mean, my opinions with her are probably not as pronounced as they are with you, but pretty much. I mean, I don't disagree with. I don't believe in war, but I do believe in Ukraine defending itself against Vladimir Putin. So she and I. But
you can't possibly agree with the hundreds of billions of dollars we're sending over to Ukraine.
I do, and so does Ann. So it's not a.
I know, and that's a problem.
I don't love the amount, but my point is, Ann Wagner and I don't fundamentally disagree. We do disagree on Israel to the extent that she equates Mr. Netanyahu with Israel, and I do think I happen to be Jewish. My grandparents were killed in the Holocaust. It's not a political issue to me. It's kind of a essential issue to me, that Israel's right to exist. So we don't really disagree on that, except that I would be with the 70% or so of the Israeli people that think a less belligerent approach would be better, and that we do have to end the war and get the hostages home. But
it's pretty belligerent to shoot. Shoot up 1,000 Israelis, and rape them. And
to me, that was I was not at all.
Belligerent.
It was one of the worst terrorist acts in history. And I said on Donnybrook very clearly that, let's just say I'm not any left.
Right.
You're not any more mad about that than I would be. My point is there's no. I don't see any equivalency at all with Hamas, but I do think we need to end the war. I mean, in other words, I think we need to use our leadership.
So does Donald Trump.
Well, fine.
So
we got
to take a break here. You hit on something I thought was very interesting about abortion and freedom and Goldwater, which I thought was fascinating, because that's a big hot button issue now, especially at the state level and in these races. And I do think it's safe to say then that no matter who is elected to the 2nd Congressional District, we're still going to be draining the Treasury for Ukraine.
Well, I mean, you're one vote. And again, I don't love draining the Treasury, but I do think it's critical to stop Vladimir Putin in his tracks. And I do not think that, unlike, you want to talk about something I don't like about Donald Trump, and very clearly, is I think from the day he took Putin's words over our intelligence agencies, whatever, he has been, to say he's an apologist for Vladimir Putin is an understatement, in my opinion. So, we have a big difference. We have a big difference.
That was just a gangster move on his part.
Okay, well,
North Korea.
Once again, it's kind of like
he intimidates these guys.
Everybody's going to have their ways to distribute. We probably aren't going to have middle ground.
I understand.
I think it's a real, not only Putin, but his affinity for dictators. Just to listen to his words. I know my friends who are Republicans who don't like Trump just say, "Well, I just block out his words." So if he congratulates Xi on being dictator for life, just block that out. He doesn't mean it. Well, he actually did. And so the idea is, I think Orban and Hungary, I don't think that I do think his affinity, we'll say, for dictators is troubling. And it's one of the things, perhaps as the son of somebody who escaped from Nazi Germany, that I find very troubling.
Right, and again, we use different words.
We use different words, but his affinity for dictators.
I don't think it's an affinity. I think it's a game he's playing with these guys, and it's worked in North Korea. Anyway, I want to come back and talk to you about abortions. I know that's really.
Well, I also want to talk about one other thing. When you come back, we'll come back. I want to talk about.
You want to just take us out then? I mean.
Well, no, I don't want. It's your show. No, I just want to make one point.
I'm just kidding you.
Ann Wagner and I have a big philosophical disagreement that isn't on issues, and it's on how you represent a district. She's gone 12 years with no debates. 12 years without a single public town hall. 12 years that I know. Now, you've been around more in the media than I have. I can't remember the last spontaneous news conference she held.
And we are as unhappy about that as you are.
And that's where, in terms of, once you get past the issues, and I understand that you and I will always disagree, but we'll disagree and still really like each other. But the point, which is my whole point of this, but Ann Wagner has never, she just doesn't have a connection, doesn't feel, I think it's a philosophical, it doesn't make her a bad person. She just doesn't feel that that's part of the job. And what happens when you do that is what happened on March 7th, which you probably know we've got very little coverage, when the radioactive waste compensation bill passed the Senate, Ann Wagner, on the record in the Kansas City Star, said, we're just not about raising our deficits and debts. Guess what? She essentially opposed publicly $3.7 billion with a B in not tax breaks, not welfare. Compensation for the thousands of people in our community that have died or continue to suffer from the poisons, and this is something I know we agree on, from World War II. And the point is, no one would do that. That night, Josh Hawley came out and called her shameful.
Oh, absolutely.
And my point is, but it's and then what she didn't do that I think they're having a press conference still today trying to figure this out. What she did not do, and this is empirical, Jamie, is she did not carry it forward. What she did do, and I'd be interested in your thoughts as a journalist, amazingly, 11 days later, when the House turned it down, when it killed the measure, she said she was outraged. She got the headlines and the TV coverage for being outraged. Yeah. And it's like, wait a minute. You and I have been seeing a lot of things. I can see if the media doesn't remember something she said 11 weeks ago, 11 months ago, 11 years ago. This was 11 days ago. She came out and said she was outraged by Congress having taken the position she had advocated, that it was too expensive. 11 days ago.
We get it. All right, Ray Hartman, we'll be back in just a second here, and we'll talk more about abortion and wrap it up then. Appreciate you being with us.
No, thanks.
This is the Allman Report on News Talk STL.
You're listening to the Allman Report on News Talk STL.
Welcome back to the Allman Report here at News Talk STL with the legendary Ray Hartman running for Congress in the 2nd District. congressional district. So you mentioned Barry Goldwater and you mentioned abortion, and I thought that President Trump's pursuit of the overturning of Roe versus Wade was a perfect Goldwater move because it sent it back to the states where it rightly belongs, constitutionally in my mind and everything else. What could possibly be wrong with it being in the hands of the states at this point?
Well, I just don't believe government. First of all, I do not trust that Donald Trump or the Republicans will not, if were Donald Trump elected with both houses of Congress, I do not believe that there wouldn't be a federal ban on abortion.
He's opposed to it.
No, I understand what he said.
We would all be opposed to a federal abortion ban.
I know what he said, but I don't believe it, and we'll just have to.
Or most of us,
That's
sorry.
where we live in different silos. So I don't accept the premise. But I don't believe that it's the role of government, and I do think it's a federal issue. I do not believe it should be left to the states. I think that the right of women to control their own bodies and make their own family decisions is, to borrow an expression, trumps the role of government. And that I
but
do not.
But they can determine that at the state level, as voters.
I don't agree that. I think that that one of the things I will vote for, and it does set me apart from Ann Wagner, is I will vote to bring into law the basic provisions of Roe v. Wade protecting a woman's right to choose up until viability. Now, not all this nonsense about people having, which is just fictional, that somebody's going to kill a baby at 38 weeks or 40, after they're born. But in terms
they
of...
They do in some states.
Okay. Well, they shouldn't, and I'm not for that. I don't think that's actually true. It reminds me when the partial birth abortion, I mentioned Trump was for it back in the time Ann Wagner was chair of the Republican Party. That was the big issue, partial birth abortion. I went to write a column about it and found there had never been one. In fact, to my knowledge, there has never been one in the in history of the state of Missouri. Now, there needed to be one for the woman Amber Thurman who died in Georgia, who needed a D&C and didn't get one, which partial birth abortion, D&C, because the doctors were afraid they were going to go to jail. She's dead now. Her 6-year-old child didn't have a mother because she had an infection in her, and they needed a D&C and they couldn't get it. That's the woman that died in Georgia 2 years ago. So I happen to believe, and I know we disagree on it, all I can say is I believe strongly in a woman's right to make those decisions for herself, and it's not, in my mind, it's not at all a state issue.
And they can secure
it's
those.
A state issue. It's not a state issue any more than the basic Civil Rights Act is a state issue. In other words, I don't think that states individually. That was the argument. Well, I'm a little older than you, I think, but back in the Civil Rights era, that was the argument. Well, states' rights if they want to have segregation. Actually, it isn't. And so I don't think that this is a state issue. I think it is a federal. We ought to federally protect women's access to abortion. I think there are, when I talk about common ground and talk about working, I think the government could do a better job on, in other words, we could do other things that maybe find some common ground, but I am unbending on the basic right of women to control their own bodies.
So you would manufacture then at the congressional level another Roe versus Wade.
I wouldn't manufacture it. I would, I'd pass a law that effectively implements Roe v. Wade as national law. I don't know if you call that. I guess any law you come up with is manufactured. But yeah, I would pass a law, and I know Kamala Harris, who, by the way, I happen to think is a really great person, and I know there's different views of everything. I think, this idea, well, she's trying to reinvent her by whatever things she said. She is who she is. I think she's going to be a great leader. I think she is going to win, and I think that if, whether Democrats can win both houses or even in a case...
I got to go. Okay. She won't.
Okay.
But you might.
All right, well, I'll take that. I'll take that, Jamie.
So, Ray Hartman.
Thank you. I really appreciate you having me on.
I appreciate you're a gamer and a friend, and I really appreciate you coming out and contacting the show to be on.
No,
I hope you all enjoy this because, hey, listen, he's a good guy. You might disagree with him, but it's worth the discussion.
You're a good guy, too. And
thanks,
that's what makes the world go around, man.
Appreciate you being on. Good luck.
You're listening to the Allman Report on News Talk STL.
Good evening, everyone. This is the Allman Report on News Talk STL, 101.9 and 94.1. Don't forget, you can podcast this. You can download the podcast, newstalkstl.com/Allman. Hope you, I don't know whether you enjoyed it, but hope you appreciated that interview with Ray Hartman. I've known him for a long time and didn't really realize, and even Phil mentioned, I didn't realize he was as left as he was, but I think that he's running as a Democrat, so I didn't really realize too much of that. But it was fun to be able to, like, one of the things that I think that is good for us in these situations is I'm not quite sure Ray ever had heard the other side of that January 6th thing. And yeah, we talk about it all the time on this radio show and beyond it. I talk about it all the time. But you heard him basically say what all the people in those Democrat circles believe, the overthrowing of the election and stuff. And it's a rare time when you can actually tell them the truth about what it was. I mean, we could talk to each other about it all the time and all day long, but I've tried to evangelize on that truth with people all over the place. And so it's really sometimes good to be able to have somebody who really truly believes that and hear somebody say, well, no, that's not what happened. This happened. And so if there was anything out of that, I thought it was great to have that discussion. And again, you know, I'm glad that he reached out to me. I will have pretty much anybody on who reaches out to me. My job, as I've told people before, I'm unless you want to pay me as part of your campaign or something, I would never be able to accept that. I wouldn't do that because that's obviously not ethical. But it's not my job to run your campaign. So questions about some of these other politicians who don't come on the show, Republican or otherwise, it's kind of their job to want to speak to you. And I'll make my efforts and that kind of thing. But those days of just kind of begging people running for office to be on with me are absolutely gone. Because I don't run their campaign and they're not paying me to run their campaign. And if they're not reaching out to me and are not on the show, that's their problem. I'm not going to sit there and beg them to be on the show. And there are a few names I can mention, but I think you know in many cases who they are. Anyway, I hope you appreciated that. And he was a gamer. I'm glad he went on. And Ted Kennedy was reprehensible. I will have to tell you that. But it's so funny how many people, you know, even when it comes to Bill Clinton or others, don't use that terminology for people who actually really are reprehensible. So kind of crazy. All right. This is really great. So President Trump had his rally today, and the Kamala Harris campaign screwed it up again, because you'd think they were actually trying to get President Trump elected with their stupid takes on things that he says. And so actually it was Kamala Harris and her campaign who announced that Donald Trump says he's going to close down the Department of Education, which I think is an excellent idea. But instead, what the Kamala Harris campaign wound up doing is they said Donald Trump wants to stop our children from getting an education. Retweet so all Americans see this. So you've got the Kamala Harris campaign retweeting Trump's awesomeness at his rallies. That's absolutely incredible.
We spend more money per pupil than any other country by far, and yet we're at the bottom of the list. Out of 40, we're ranked about number 40.
All true.
And I'm going to close the Department of Education and move education back to the states. And we're going to do it fast.
That is an excellent idea. And, you know, and it's so funny. It's kind of like when Hillary Clinton used to do her commercials. And she would say, Donald Trump's going to do this, and Donald Trump's going to do that, and Donald Trump's going to do this, and Donald Trump's going to do that. And most of us are looking at her anti-Trump commercials saying, wow, those are awesome ideas. I like him even better now. And President Trump saying this, that he would move education back to the states, is an excellent and very, very conservative idea. And he had all the reasons to do it because it's just a dwelling of a bureaucracy. It is taking all of this money, and yet we're still at the bottom, and the states would be better off able to handle this. That's all he was saying. And Kamala Harris helped him by getting the word out about his awesome idea.
Out of 40, we're ranked about number 40. And I'm going to close the Department of Education and move education back to the states. And we're going to do it fast. Maybe I'll have you do that. I'll use Lee. Maybe I'll have you. You could do it. That's not too easy. We'll get somebody great. We'll get Lee Zeldin is here with us tonight.
Yeah, good for Lee Zeldin.
I think that's a job
so
for Lee.
this is an excellent idea, and it actually and it was last night. I'm sorry, not today. And it's an excellent idea, and Kamala Harris's campaign just simply helped the Trump campaign push out an excellent idea, even to the point where they wanted people to retweet it, which is just absolutely amazing. This happened too, and you remember I was giving Sandra Smith a little bit of trouble yesterday about the herd of balls story that she read. But she did a great job with this Kamala Harris surrogate, and this woman lost her mind because because you don't want somebody doing this when they're supposedly speaking for you.
What is Harris's plan? We're waiting.
Okay.
Plan on the economy, by the way.
There's a lot of aspects to it in regards to looking at it online. So let's talk about lowering the grocery costs, because that's something that's brought up. The viewers can look at this online. She talks about certain things in regards to advancing the first federal ban on.
And by the way, she's reading from something too, which makes it even more weird.
Price gouging on food and groceries, to set clear rules to the road to make it clear that big corporations can't unfairly exploit consumers as well.
Is that
and
happening?
secure new
Is that happening?
It's not at this moment. No, this is her plan that's laid out for the first 100 days.
And and actually Sandra's question is gouging really happening? And she thinks she's asking her whether the plan is happening. It's like,
she becomes president of the United States of America.
Gouging, is that currently happening?
In regards to I don't know exactly if that's currently happening or.
Yeah, I don't know if it's happening. You know, Kamala Harris, by the way, I know you're her surrogate, but I hate to break it to you, dear. Kamala Harris has said gouging is happening, even though, of course, it's not. And then her surrogate is saying, well, I actually don't know whether it's happening or not.
Because I'm not privy to that type of information, but there are people
and she's not privy to that type of information, by the way, just so you know.
Costing a lot of money in regards to groceries.
Okay. It seems like you're having a hard time articulating her plan. And
I'm not. Honestly, that's not true. Please, I'm constantly being interrupted by you, which, as a woman, I think is disrespectful.
Unbelievable, unbelievable, and you know that is the last play of anybody who is being intellectually smeared, and I mean smeared in a good way, in a battle or a debate, is to claim, well, I'm a woman, and as a woman, that's disrespectful to be interrupted. Well, nobody likes being interrupted, but what Sandra Smith is trying to do is get her to say anything strongly policy-wise about what Kamala Harris is going to do about the high price of groceries and commodities for people.
To groceries.
Okay. It seems like you're having a hard time articulating her plan. And
I'm not. Honestly, that's not true. Please, I'm constantly being interrupted by you, which, as a woman, I think is disrespectful. When I'm trying to speak, every time I try and speak, you speak over me.
Okay, final thought.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, I was giving you time there. All right, thank you very much. I appreciate
That's her
you
final thought. Thanks so much for having me. Unbelievable, and what a disaster, and yet another example of how the Kamala Harris campaign is absolutely imploding. And the fear factor among these individuals in the Democrat Party is absolutely just through the roof. It's also through the roof at the congressional level. You'd notice we had today this huge gaslighting event in Congress, and this is what happened. There is a plan by some lawmakers to push a constitutional amendment basically to undermine election integrity and control House vacancies in the event of a national crisis. So these lawmakers are claiming that there will be a possible mass casualty event that will possibly leave some vacancies because presumably a bunch of lawmakers are going to be dead or what? So this is how our Gateway Pundit story reads: as political tensions rise in U.S. Congress, in the U.S., Congress is preparing for the possibility of a mass casualty event that could change its makeup. So they're considering this drastic step, including a possible constitutional amendment that would allow for the direct appointment of House representatives in the event of mass vacancies. According to the Constitution, any emerging vacancies in the House must be filled through elections. But they want to make sure in some way, shape, or form that they can simply just appoint these people instead of having them go through the election process. This subcommittee hearing they had prepared for the future by learning from the past, according to lawmakers. Derek Kilmer, who's a leading proponent of the bill, stated during the hearing that Congress hasn't fully considered the implications of a mass casualty event affecting members and the impact it would have on our ability to function in a time of need. Now, keep in mind, mass casualty event or not, if this constitutional amendment is approved and passed, it would still be there. So it wouldn't take a mass casualty event necessarily to allow for the appointment of members of the House of Representatives in the event of a vacancy. So let's pretend that we have a situation where an election maybe hasn't even been determined yet before the next turnover of the House, and there's a vacancy. They want to be able to appoint somebody to sit in that seat that isn't even elected. This is the kind of stuff, these machinations, these moves by Congress and by lawmakers is only a move reflective of a deep fear of what ultimately looks like an inevitable loss to them. And so these are the kinds of shenanigans that these guys are playing with, and they want to toy with the Constitution to change the way we actually have people in the House of Representatives. And whether this actually happens or not, the fact that they're even considering it should give you a good insight into just how afraid these individuals are. Hey, coming up, I want to go back in time as President Trump appears on the Oprah show. You know, Kamala did, but this is back about 30 years ago, where he foreshadowed his run for the presidency, just as a little, palate cleanser for you. And also, there's something going on with this Diddy stuff that's going to be very, very interesting. It looks like it might be another Epstein thing, because you're going to hear about the possibility there are some rather famous names that you may know although we don't know the names yet, who appeared at some of Diddy's now legendary freak parties that he had. So I'll have all that for you on the other side of this. This is the Allman Report on News Talk STL.
You're listening to the Allman Report on News Talk STL.
Good evening, everyone. This is the Allman Report on News Talk STL. Happy Tuesday evening to all of you and yours. Don't forget, we are sticky everywhere on X, on Facebook, my page, as well as News Talk STL's page, and Rumble, Truth Social, you name it, you got it. So, as you know, kind of the theme of the week here has always been this talk the people who are afraid about the outcome of the election off of the ledge. And I've talked to many of you, and I'm not saying you're on the ledge or freaking out, but you're concerned about things. And I try to draw you into not the bigger picture stuff, but some of the smaller picture stuff that you're seeing with people in the Teamsters, that you're seeing with black voters in Chicago, the one woman who was a self-described lesbian white woman and her support of Donald Trump on TikTok. She's a TikTok influencer. Those little things start to tell kind of a bigger story when they are all kind of smooshed together in one, as opposed to like just this general feeling. You're starting to get all kinds of different signals from different places. And the first thing, and I'll just take a bigger picture for you. The first thing is the national polls. That don't mean a whole lot because the state polls are showing President Trump, especially in some of the swing states, and this will be a Midwestern state battle. Trump is winning in all of those states, which is why, again, I will tell you my prediction is that President Trump will win the Electoral College, if not the popular vote. So that's going to happen anyway, in my opinion. And that is signaled by some of these statewide pollings. The national polling is not as important, but it is a good indication of how, in spite of what the news media is saying, and in spite of what everybody seems to be telling you in the mainstream media, Kamala Harris does not have this in the bag in any way, shape, or form. If you didn't have polls and you just watched the national news or anything like that, you would believe that Kamala Harris is running away with this thing. That Kamala Harris is just off the charts, just making headway and doing amazing things, and the momentum is in her path. But if you look at the polls, I mean, you're talking about, even with margin of errors, 3-4 percentage points, and it shouldn't be that tight if indeed what the news media and the others and all those idiots out there you're hearing are saying about Kamala Harris's just amazingness. It's just not bearing out in any of the numbers, and it's not bearing out anecdotally in a variety of the ways that I've already described to you. This latest one is a Gallup poll. And the Gallup poll, I mean, I don't want to hit you with poll after poll, but again, even if you don't really believe in polls, you can believe in some of the essences that these polls are emitting, the flavors that these polls are spitting out to us. So this doesn't mean Trump has the election in the bag, but here is what the latest Gallup poll says. Nearly all Gallup measures that have shown some relationship to past presidential election outcomes or that speak to current perceptions of the two major parties favor the Republican Party over the Democratic Party. So the Republican Party at this point is favored by a majority of respondents to the Gallup poll. Chief among these Republican advantages in U.S. adults, party identification and leanings, the belief that the GOP, rather than a Democratic Party, is better able to handle the most important problems facing the country. Americans have a deep dissatisfaction with the state of the nation and negative evaluations of the economy with the Democrat administration in office. And it's not just one measure, it's nearly all measures in which Republicans are favored all around. So, party better able to handle the most important problem, Republican Party 46, Democrat Party 41. And as Gallup points out, those numbers have always borne themselves out in the past in election outcomes, meaning whoever's on top in these types of polls wins the election, the presidential election. So, economic confidence. The bottom line is Republicans are favored on economic confidence. In U.S. satisfaction, Republicans are favored as the party that will lead to more satisfaction and not less. Party better able to keep America safe from international threats. this is the Republican Party at 54% and the Democrat Party at 40%. And so the bottom line is, on all these very, very important measures, Gallup is saying that in the past, these measures have borne out in presidential election outcomes, and whoever's on top has won the presidential election, according to Gallup's past research and past measures. What's interesting is that Congress, the job approval there is at 20%, and in the Gallup poll, basically, people are saying, I don't favor Republicans and I don't favor Democrats. So the view of Congress is very, very poor. And ultimately, what will happen is that translates in many ways to a gravitation towards a presidential candidate who will be able to tame Congress in that way, or make up for the problems among Congress members, or the ineptitude, or the fighting, or what have you. And so in this case, it does look like the focus of many voters is really, really on the presidential election, as opposed to some of these congressional elections. And I think most people, and in some cases they might be right, their instincts might be right, that as long as you have a president who is effective and doing his job, then the foibles of Congress in the end ultimately aren't really going to matter. And that's interesting, considering that even during Trump's time, when you had the House controlled by Republicans, whatever, and Congress controlled by Republicans, but even if the House turns Democrat, but President Trump is elected, Americans feel that whole division can be allayed by the fact that Trump is actually president and being a leader, and will somehow even influence some Democrats in Congress. So just want to pass that on to you for those of you who still feel that there's a possibility that Trump's going to lose this thing and whatever. Listen to all the little sirens going off, and not to the big ones going off, for instance, in the form of a Drudge headline or what have you. I know you folks are a little more thoughtful than that, but there are a lot of people who just kind of see things in passing, or they'll be at an airport or somewhere in a lobby where CNN is on, and it continually has that little the words going across the bottom of the screen. You have to keep in mind, just as an aside, I'm not going to bore you here, but just as an aside, that is one way that the news media has figured out, especially cable news and especially CNN, how to kind of change people's attitudes and propagandize, even if you can't hear it. So what they do is they just scroll along all these propaganda pieces about Kamala Harris, because that's what people do when they can't hear the television. They just look at the bottom of the screen and see what's rolling past. And that's another way that these creeps in the news media try to propagandize. This is interesting. This is coming since Oprah's kind of been in the news lately with Kamala on. Somebody dug up the Trump appearance in a 1988 Oprah episode. And President Trump then was talking about a possible run for president.
Major U.S. newspapers last year criticizing U.S. foreign policy. What would you do differently, Donald?
I'd make our allies, forgetting about the enemies you can't talk to so easily, I'd make our allies pay their fair share. We're a debtor nation. Something's going to happen over the next number of years with this.
And keep in mind, by the way, this is 1988. And Trump was already talking about making our allies pay their fair share. And you fast forward 30 years, 40 years, and Republicans and Democrats still didn't even pick up on it or do anything about it. Now you know why Trump so attractive when he came in and told that story as a candidate and said, hey, we need to make them pay their fair share. Can you imagine it being a problem even then, 40 years ago almost, and the Republicans never did anything about it, even though they were ultimately in office, come 2000. and they never did anything about it.
Because you can't keep going on losing $200 billion, and yet we let Japan come in and dump everything right into our markets and everything. It's not free trade. If you ever go to Japan right now and try to sell something, forget about it, Oprah.
Yeah, crazy. That's 1988, almost 40 years ago, when President Trump was talking about how free trade was not really fair. And even after Republicans took over, they still didn't do anything about it. He had to come back and announce the same thing, which got him elected in 2016. But those two things there, he talked about that ultimately pointed out a problem that Republicans never did anything about. In fact, it only got worse. Trade, as well as holding our allies accountable for their share of the defense of the Western world and of righteousness.
Just forget about it. It's almost impossible. They don't have laws against it. They just make it impossible. They come over here, they sell their cars, their VCRs, they knock the hell out of our companies. And, hey, I have tremendous respect for the Japanese people. I mean, you can respect somebody that's beating the hell out of you, but they are beating the hell out of this country. Kuwait, they live like kings. The poorest person in Kuwait, they live like kings. And yet they're not paying. We make it possible for them to sell their oil. Why aren't they paying us 25% of what they're making? It's a joke.
This sounds like political presidential talk to me, and I know people have talked to you about whether or not you want to run. Would you ever?
1988.
Probably not. But I do get tired of seeing the country ripped off.
Why would you not?
I just don't think I really have the inclination to do it. I love what I'm doing. I really like it.
Also, it doesn't pay as well.
No, it doesn't. But, you know, I just probably wouldn't do it, Oprah. I probably wouldn't, but I do get tired of seeing what's happening with this country. And if it got so bad, I would never want to rule it out totally, because I really am tired of seeing what's happening with this country, how we're really making other people live like kings, and we're not.
What do you think of this year's presidential race, the way it's shaping up?
Well, it's going to be very interesting. I think that probably George Bush has an advantage in terms of the election. I think that probably people would say that he's got like that little edge in terms of the incumbency, et cetera, et cetera. But I think Jesse Jackson's done himself very proud. I think Michael Dukakis has done one hell of a job. And George Bush has done a hell of a job. You know, they all went in there sort of as semi-underdogs, including George Bush, and they've all come out. I think people that are around all three of those candidates can be very proud of the jobs they've done.
Yeah. I don't know about that, but you know what ultimately happened in 88. Dukakis was leading H.W. Bush for a long, long time, almost up until around now. And then Dukakis pulled that tank helmet thing that he did. Remember that? And then also H.W., his campaign came out with these commercials showing him as a war hero. And that changed the tenor and the tone, and H.W. wound up winning that election in a matter of a couple months. It completely and totally turned around. But keep in mind, H.W. didn't do anything about the trade situation, didn't do anything about holding the other countries, our allies, accountable. Republicans sat on their hands. H.W., of course, lost the election, re-election to Bill Clinton because a lot of people went for Ross Perot because H.W. lied. He said no new taxes, and that's exactly what we got. And Americans didn't like that. Republicans didn't like that. And once they had a different choice, they went for Ross Perot. Anyway, that's vintage Donald Trump.
You've said, though, that if you did run for president, you believe you'd win.
88.
Well, I don't know. I think I'd win. I tell you what, I wouldn't go in to lose. I've never gone in to lose in my life. And if I did decide to do it, I think I'd be inclined. I would say that I would have a hell of a chance of winning, because I think people, I don't know how your audience feels, but I think people are tired of seeing the United States ripped off. And I can't promise you everything, but I can tell you one thing. This country would make one hell of a lot of money from those people that for 25 years have taken advantage. It wouldn't be the way it's been, believe me.
Yeah, great. Vintage Donald Trump, 1988. Virtually talking the same way he has been talking and talked in 2016 and still talks. And in my opinion, he will win again. And again, I don't want to be overconfident, but we'll see. As long as he didn't wind up at one of Diddy's freak show parties, which of course he didn't, but some people did in the political world, and that is now a big story about how Diddy now apparently has photographs, videos of some well-known people who appeared at his little freak parties. I'll tell you more about that on the other side of this. This is the Allman Report on this Thursday evening. Jamie Allman here, pleased and privileged to be with you, and super happy to have, again, my wonderful sponsors. And I want to put this up on the web next couple days or so. I went to Newstalk's Fine Jewelry there at Doherty Ferry in Big Bend and shot a video with Eric and the team. A lot of focus now on engagement rings, things like that as we head into the holiday season. It's a big time for engagements. And they have some beautiful, I mean beautiful rings. And these are gorgeous lab-grown diamonds as well as mined diamonds. You take your pick on that. There is no real difference. It just depends on your proclivities and your passions. But the lab-grown diamonds are very, very beautiful, and sometimes even more beautiful than the mine-grown diamonds. But you can figure that out. There's also a big run to gold. Gold jewelry is kind of back in style for a lot of women. Back in the day, there were a lot of women who thought, well, gold is just kind of 80s. It's what my mom and grandma used to wear. And so they all kind of went to sterling silver or what have you. And now gold is back. And they have some great, great items for you for holiday gifts, birthday gifts, whatever. And so go on in to Newstalk's Fine Jewelry there at Doherty Ferry in Big Bend. Check it out on the web. You can kind of pre-shop or just kind of preview at wowdiamonds.com. Longtime supporters of free, common sense, conservative radio and the Allman brand. So love those guys. My continued prayers for Richard, who is kind of laid up right now. He's getting some heart stuff done for him. So our prayers go out to Richard Newstalk and to Jackie, who injured herself, and she's kind of laid up a little bit. But they're going full steam ahead, and Diana Newstalk's there, Anna's there, and, of course, Eric's there, and Cindy's there. And so these are just some great people, and I hope you get to meet them and tell them that you appreciate their support of free, common sense, conservative radio and the Allman brand. This is the Allman Report on NewsTalkSTL.
You're listening to the Allman Report on News Talk STL.
Phil Valencia, if you are listening to this broadcast right now, this song's for you. Ethan Valencia, you think your dad's a Jeff Beck fan?
Oh, I don't know.
Have you heard of jamming that at the house or anything?
No, I did not grow up to this song. I do not know.
Well, I know he knows who Jeff Beck is, so. Thank you, Phil, for helping us set up the armchair interview with Ray Hartman. Great job, Ethan Valencia, also on all that, and hopefully you guys enjoyed that.
I loved it.
In some way, shape, or form.
Do it again, that's what I say.
Yeah, man, the armchair stuff is good. I like it. You know, Ray talks a lot, but, you know, I didn't really have him on to necessarily just do all the talking myself, too, so there's a balance there, but that's how you do it. A little Jeff Beck for you people here on this Tuesday evening. This is the Allman Report on News Talk STL. Don't forget to download the podcast if you want. NewsTalkSTL.com/Allman. So this ought to be kind of uncomfortable, and this will be pretty interesting to see. This is a new, because I haven't really necessarily cared about this story very much. I haven't told you about it, talked about it. I'm just not. Some of it's so salacious. I'm just not really all that interested in that kind of stuff. Unless, of course, Sandra Smith talks about herds of balls, and then I'm like, okay, that'll get salacious there, I guess. But anyway. Diddy's bodyguard is now saying that there are tapes of politicians and some celebrities at Diddy's so-called freak-offs, and also is claiming that Diddy learned all this nefariousness from other music moguls. And you know what's going to happen here if this is indeed true. You know, Diddy's going to dump all this as much as he could because he's such a horrible person that anything that he can use to drag other horrible people down with him, he will do. So apparently Diddy kept these tapes. And, you know, right now, he claims that his arrest is tied to an alleged corruption scandal currently gripping New York City politics right now. And what's happening is you're seeing, you know, kind of these things with Hochul, and you're seeing the raids on Mayor Adams' offices and things like that, people around him. So apparently some things are falling apart in New York City, and since Diddy might have some of these tapes of these people in these compromising positions, Diddy thinks that basically he might have been arrested to keep this from even ever, you know, showing its face. So, you know, Diddy's bodyguard says, listen, I think he's a terrible person, and, you know, I'm not saying that I'm somehow innocent in all this, but the fact of the matter is, you know, I am still going to say that he has these tapes, and he could be possibly dangerous with these tapes of politicians and celebrities at the so-called freak-off parties. So we'll see how that whole thing goes. We still haven't seen all of the Epstein list either. So anyway, speaking of creeps and creepiness, guess what happened on The View? So they decide after Michael Eric Dyson is caught sending these flirtatious texts to Nancy Mace, the congresswoman, after he called her a racist and all that kind of stuff on a CNN show. The View decides they're going to help Dyson clean all this up. Unbelievable. Listen to this.
So now you're calling me racist.
I didn't say. I just said you weren't racist.
That is complete.
No, you don't have right.
Kamala Harris.
Kamala. You said we don't call you Nancy.
So because we live in the crazy year of 2024, she then later accused you of sending her flirty texts, which she entered into the congressional record.
It wasn't only an accusation.
Can you clear this up for us, Professor?
She had the
Absolutely.
texts.
Well, first of all, it's great to be here with you wonderful women.
Yes.
The thing is that, let's look at a little background. I'm a preacher. So I know sin, my own and others, right? Nobody's perfect. I saw Whoopi yesterday talk about the fact in regard to Janet Jackson, people make mistakes, and we have to acknowledge that. Number two, as a professor, I've seen things evolve over space and time. What you could say 20 years ago, can't say today.
No.
Not because you're suddenly wrong, but the temper of the times has changed.
Right.
So if you acknowledge a woman's beauty, that is a power imbalance, there's a problem there. But peer-to-peer, a different story. Still cautious, but different. And then thirdly, let's look at the politics. We're living in a toxic culture where there's a cancel culture gotcha. We're not trying to elevate, we're trying to eviscerate. So when it comes to Nancy Mace, you see I tried to be nice to the woman. I said, you're a wonderful woman. I lied. I then said, but I tried to be nice to her. And then even when I pointed out to her what the repetition of the misnaming of Kamala Harris would do, she got defensive. Oh, you're calling me a racist. No.
And you never did. I
never did.
Yeah.
I think Shakespeare said the lady doth protest too much. Or in the hood, we say a hit dog will holler. So the point is that this woman.
Anyway, you get the point. And this thing, and so they allow him to clean it up and actually wind up blaming Nancy Mace for all of this, and the women don't even step in and defend her. It's unbelievable. That's how dark and soulless these women on The View are. That as long as it's a Republican who was on the receiving end of somebody's dirty little flirty little demeaning text, and again, it's not demeaning to call somebody beautiful. But it's demeaning after you've eviscerated them like that to then objectify them in that kind of manner. I mean, it's not unusual. People text people all the day, oh, look at our picture. We look great together or what have you. That's not unusual, but it is after you have abused somebody on TV the way Michael Eric Dyson abused Nancy Mace. And to go back then and objectify her in that fashion, instead of saying, hey, sorry I called you a racist or whatever, instead it's just kind of like out of the blue. It's like, don't we look great together? And then you ask for more pictures. So this is unbelievable. All right, and before I leave here, I got to play you this. So the guy who's responsible for Kamala Harris's achievement ad that Gavin Newsom decided he was going to shepherd in a law banning AI-driven fake videos or deep fake videos. There's a new parody video after he banned the fake videos. And of course, now there's a totally brand new one out that is currently being made. I want to draw you back because I've already shared this part of it with you, but it's really good.
Hi, I'm Gavin Newsom, and I'm definitely not gay. A lot of people are criticizing me for banning AI-generated political videos. So let me explain. The problem is that Democrats, like me, we're not the brightest bulbs in the tanning bed. We can't always distinguish between reality and fiction. When Elon Musk posted Mr. Reagan's brilliant Kamala Harris parody video, I thought that was real. And so I realized, without laws governing what we are allowed to see and hear, how will we ever know what's really true? If I don't ban Mr. Reagan's AI parody videos, how would we ever know that Trump will be a dictator on day one, or that if he doesn't win, he's promised a bloodbath? How would we know that Hunter Biden's laptop was Russian disinformation? Also, I'm definitely not gay. Also.
So anyway, that goes on. That's part of the ad, and there's still more to come on that. So far, we've got 3 parody ads thrown at Gavin Newsom and Kamala Harris, 2 of them after Gavin Newsom outlawed them. So the trolling continues, and it's a ton of fun, and it's been a ton of fun to be with you. So thank you for listening to the show. Don't forget, we're sticky everywhere, and thank you for your support of free, common sense, conservative radio. Ethan Valencia, thank you a ton, too. Good night, everybody.